Hi guys, what's going on? Oh boy. Hello everybody. All right. So today's story regards these twins that I have thought about every now and then, Jennifer and June Gibbons, who are famously known as the Silent Twins. So a little bit about them. They were born in 1963 in, I believe, Yemen. From Yemen, they moved to Wales in an army base, and they were definitely candidates for speech therapy and occupational therapy. These two twins, they were a little bit developmentally delayed. They were not able to speak by the time that they should have, and when they did, it was a little bit of chirps and squeaks and things that people really could not understand. But growing up, these two girls were the only black people in their class, so that made them an easy target for bullying. It's the 1960s. You're literally surrounded by all white people. On top of that, children just are prone to bothering kids and each other. So they got picked on and harassed on to the point where school officials had to let them leave early just so that they could go home in peace. So why would they choose to talk to any of these people that continuously harass them? That's the sad part, and I feel like this whole story is sad. I don't know why a lot of people promote this as the evil twins, the creepy evil twins, when really it's just a sad case. But still interesting nonetheless. I mean, when you're born a twin, you're pretty much born with a best friend. And the bond between these two, and I'm sure, with all twins, there's just something undeniably intimate in a way. And they grew to just communicate with each other. And this is where it kind of gets strange, because they refused to even talk to their parents. They would hide in their rooms and have this whole imaginative storytelling through diary entries and just writing little short stories. Some would be about their dolls and the ways that they would each die, which I found a little creepy too, due to the lack of communication and the way that they were literally synchronized in movements and just so far apart from everybody else. People wanted to study them. They wanted to see what the hell is going on. So there's some footage of them going through some exercises with these specialists. Very eerie, those clips. You kind of see them just moving in slow motion. I had to do a double take thinking that they actually slowed down the footage, but then you see everybody else just walking around at a normal pace, and they're just going back and forth. And June says how, when they did that kind of stuff, it was like a game in their head, which, I mean, when you're like that, you're gonna have your own little quirks, I guess, and how you relate to the outside world. So they would play kind of games with each other in a sort of social experiment, if you will.
Ethan Bradbury?
Just very slow. I'm sure that had to do with just how withdrawn they were. It just feels like a struggle, just like moving through this awful environment that you're in. I'm sure it was just traumatizing. So they had tried to separate them when they were in boarding school. So they both went to separate boarding schools, but that just failed miserably. They went into a catatonic state they would continue not to improve their communication at all. They were so in sync. There would be times where they were in completely different areas and they would kind of be in the same position. And that in and of itself is just a little eerie. So that didn't work. When they got back together, they continued their habits of just talking to themselves. They also had their own little language, which was a very fast-paced English with some Barbadian slang. And I wish they had more footage on what that sounded like, because I'm just so curious. So by the time they were 16, they were no longer in school. They started getting assistance from the government. June mentions how they tried to do this course on how to communicate with people. It just shows the effort that they wanted to put into improving, but it just wasn't enough. They just didn't, work on it, and it just, there was no click. They actually had pen pals. They would write so much that in a way they were communicating with the outside world through their letters and writing. That was a dream of theirs, that someday their short stories or novels would be published for the world to read, but there was not much they could kind of do with since they were very reserved. So they had met these guys that were on trial or were in the news because they had committed arson, and they had somehow met up with them, and they were kind of instantly in like, if that's still a thing. And they kind of had a crush on these two guys. Not a good influence on them. So the twins just start kind of wreaking havoc on the town. They commit, breaking and entering. June goes on about stealing some items from this woman's house. They set a building on fire, and they would write about this stuff. They would write about things that would happen to them every day. Woo! Oh my god, Anakin. God damn it. But they got violent too. They would literally try and kill each other. There was one instance that June is talking about how she's trying to drown her in a river, and Jennifer would do the same. They would both just try and drown each other. That was very short-lived. I mean, they were teenagers kind of for maybe a week, and after the whole arson, they were put to trial, and they were sent to one of the most high security institutions in England. Once they're in this institution called Broadmoor, they come in contact with a journalist called Marjorie Wallace. She goes to visit them every weekend. She starts just, reaching out to the judge that sentenced them and things like that so that they could leave. They were able to write. I feel like that's another thing where they had this potential to be so articulate, and just they had a way with words. But at the same time, you could tell through their writing and their behavior that there was such a torment with each other. So Marjorie continues to advocate. She eventually reduces the sentence, and they can go to this lower security clinic that, isn't as vicious as this one, and they can go there for a year and then eventually go out into the world. So this is where it gets weird, because they fight about how someone needs to die before they get liberated, before they get to move on. And they finally decide it's Jennifer. So Marjorie goes on to one of her last visits at Broadmoor. She brings her daughter, you know, they're all having tea and they're laughing and catching up, and Jennifer just turns to her and spills the fucking tea. She's like, look, one of us is gonna die. Like, we're getting out of here, but we decided that I'm dying. And, you know, Marjorie's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're healthy, you're, you know, young, why? She was just very confused. So after the whole visit, she called every doctor possible and she was like, can you please keep an eye on these girls? And they did. Nothing out of the ordinary happened that night. But the next day, you know, they're going to this new clinic. So the gates open, Jennifer and June are in the back seat. And then Jennifer, she just kind of slides on June's shoulder and goes into a full-on coma. This was the biggest mystery, and I don't think it's ever going to be solved as to what the hell happened. Then they took her to the hospital where she was pronounced dead that day, and it was just the moment of freedom for June in a way. So at Caswell Clinic, June is there for a year. She finally gets to live her life after that year. And I think she was in a halfway house and she's still writing. I don't remember what she's up to as of today, but you know, it's a much better life. She still continues to visit her sister, and on their grave, this is what June had wrote for them, which is still pretty beautiful. It says, we once were two, we two made one, we no more two, through life be one. Rest in peace, Jennifer. So that's the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons. I think it's one of the most interesting ones ever. It has that mystery and the psyche behind these twins and the sadness that just came out of everything. The potential that these girls had. I mean, they were intelligent, articulate people, very creative and imaginative, and if only something had gone through so that they could express that to the world and just be these beautiful twins that they were meant to be. So at least June now, you know, she's living her best life, or trying to, and there's not that torment and entrapment that they feel that they had with each other. So thank you for listening. Here we are again in this dark, dark world, you and me in this video. And I'll see you next time. Woo! Oh my god, Anakin. God damn it. Don't I just have such a fancy setup? He's such a whore. Anakin, what are you doing, bro? Don't wink at me.